and we are happy to be here for our first episode of Human+Kind, Raising Good Humans. And what better way to kick it off than by talking about sex education and porn.
Brilliant topic, Sarah.
So we're here today, we're talking to Lael Stone from Birth, Sexuality and Parenting. And we really just want to start off today by asking you, it's not really just about the talk anymore, is it? When we think of sex education, it's so much more.
It is. It's a really big topic, and I think, from the generations that have come, it's been this: you have this awkward talk with your child and give them the kind of facts, and it's all really uncomfortable, and then they should be on their way. But really, what we need to redefine is that sex education is an ongoing education, and it starts when kids are little, and we just continue the conversation as age appropriately as they get older. So there's so many benefits to doing this. And I mean, one firstly is purely for safety, in the sense of that when we teach our little ones about body parts, about private parts and public parts, about how our bodies work, firstly it gives them empowerment to feel informed around what's happening, but also being really aware that if they do get into a place of danger, they can say no, they come to you with the right words around what's happening. So firstly, we look at it from the perspective of safety for little kids. Okay. And then next from there, we look at it about giving them education to understand how their bodies work. So we teach our kids about, digestion, we teach them about healthy eating, sexuality and how our bodies work is just as important. Then that also helps them be prepared. So when they do get into puberty and they move into those teenage years, which are really highly important that they've got the right information, they are prepared and they can navigate it. So I also look at it that if we start these conversations when our kids are little, as a parent, you get more and more practice at how to have these conversations.
Yes.
Because
so just pinpoint those 3 steps that you just said. So from the ages of...
So from the age of 2 to 4 to 5, what we're talking about is body parts. We're talking about parts of our bodies that are private and then parts that are public. So nobody's allowed to touch your private parts. Nobody's allowed to ask to see those private parts unless it's, a trusted adult or, a doctor, something like that. We're also teaching them about, how our bodies actually work. So kids naturally are really inquisitive. So, a 4-year-old's going to see a pregnant woman and go, how does a baby get in there? And that's a great opportunity to go, really great question. Okay, so there's a seed and there's an egg and they come together. And for little kids, it's just biology. Yes. It is not about sex. No. It is just about how things work. Yes. And so if we have practice doing that when they're little, as our kids get older, we become far more comfortable with having those deeper, in-depth conversations that move into.
So, what's your opinion on nicknames for private parts?
You can have nicknames for private parts, but as long as your children know the appropriate names for their genitals, because there's many times where kids can get in trouble. They might call something a cookie, like a penis is called a cookie or something like that, and then say someone's trying to touch my cookie, to another adult, and they're like, well, just give them a piece, give them a cookie. I think nicknames are okay, but kids really need to know the anatomical names of our bodies. Yeah. And the other thing around that too is that when we don't have these conversations with kids and when we use nicknames, the undercurrent is that there's something embarrassing or there's some shame around that. And what we really want to imprint with our children is there is no shame in our bodies and there's no shame in sexuality. That's the adult hang up, right? Which we need to sort out so that we can imprint our kids in a really healthy way about how amazing their bodies work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you talk a lot about the adult hang-up, don't you? So if we start the conversations when our children are young, and as you say, we get used to having those conversations, it becomes easier as they get older.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of the issues do stem from our own
backgrounds. Yeah, look, sexuality is a really big topic that a lot of people have much baggage around. On one end of the scale, we have really horrible, abuse and things that have not been pleasant, and then the other end of the scale, we have, just shame that we took on from our own parents. Around sex and sexuality. So, when this topic comes up in the workshops I teach, parents are just like, I just don't know how to do it. And a lot of it is because of their own embarrassment or how they feel around sex and sexuality. So I often say to parents, so have a think back to the sex education you got from your parents. Was it everything you needed and wanted? And not once do I have had a parent say, yeah, I got all the info I needed. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, you need to be the parent that you needed when you were a kid, right? That's the ideal. So you need to find a way to look at whatever your hang-ups are around sex or how that sits with you, whether that's talking to someone, whether that's just doing a bit of self-exploration to really see, where it sits for you, so that you can come to your kids, as calm and as confidently as possible to have these conversations, because then what happens is that imprints in them, which says sex is a normal thing, it's nothing to be embarrassed about, all those kind of good messages that we want to imprint with our kids.
Do you know what I find interesting is that though you can have 3 children from one family, same parents, and you can have one child that will run around naked till the age of 13 without, and then another child can actually have quite want to protect themselves. So it's interesting even from that perspective of the parent that comes with these, not hang-ups, but come with where do they sit in this before they start educating, but also their personality type as well.
Totally. And look, I think the thing is with sex education is that people, the belief was we'll wait till they're hitting puberty and then we'll have these conversations. But the imprint on sexuality has actually already been done, because children watch everything from the moment they're born. So we may say one thing, but they're watching actually what we do. So that's not just around sex education. It's around everything. It's around how we think about our bodies. It's how we believe in ourselves. It's how we interact with money. It's how we interact in relationships. Our children just watch, and that is the imprint.
Absolutely.
So again, I say, if you're wanting to create healthy sex education in your family, then it starts with you as an adult in your relationship. So being tender to each other, with your partner, or being tender to yourself, and looking after your own needs, and those little things, that is the imprint that children get around sex and sexuality. So by the age of 10, 11, 12, where parents are worried, oh my God, they're looking at porn, I'm like, well, they've actually had an imprint already, which is by watching you guys. So this is where we need to be mindful about how we talk about ourselves, how we interact with our intimate partners, modelling good, healthy relationships. The work is always here as the parent, and then that's when it imprints into our child. So I always say you have to be careful. You can say one thing, but if you're doing the other, then that's what your child's doing.
And so when you're looking at the safety, so we've gone into safety, and then you go into the next phase with your child. What could you just go through that again?
It's in the next kind of age group. So look, if we're looking at kind of safety and consent and just how the bodies work when kids are little. So then kind of that next step, which is like 5 to 9 years of age before we kind of move into puberty, is talking about how bodies change in puberty, and kids might then want a little bit more information about what actually sex is, and how babies do actually come out, and those kind of things. So they will naturally be inquisitive and ask questions. And I often say to parents, look, the job is to be what we call an askable parent, which means that it's safe enough for your child to come to you and ask you anything that they want to ask you. So that if they come to you and say, I heard this thing at school about this, what is that? You're not like, Jesus. You're like, good question. Really good question. So a great kind of script to have is when your child comes to you and asks you something, you say, great question. Why are you asking that? What have you heard something, or what's made you think about that? So you get a bit of a gauge about where they're sitting with that. Then if you and yourself are freaking out thinking, I don't know how to answer that, you can always say, that's a really great question. Give me a moment and I'll get back to you with it. Then you can go on Google if you want. Or
ring Lael.
Or there's some good resources I'll tell you about in a minute that you can just jump online and have a look at. And then come back to them, and really it's about factual answers. Particularly, when kids are little, it's really, as I said, about biology. It's about how things work. That's what it is. There's no sex around that for little kids, because it's not really until they hit puberty that it moves into that frame of sex and intimacy and all those kind of things.
And I remember you saying, when we've spoken in the past, about how children will take in what they need to take in. So you'll give them a certain amount of information, and you can think, I've had that conversation. They know everything they need to know. But they actually don't. And I had a conversation with my daughter. I told her about how babies are made and where they come from, etc. And then a month or so later, she was surprised to hear where babies come from. And I said to her, well, where do you think they came from? And she said, I thought they came out of your mouth. Even though I'd had the whole conversation with her. So she'd obviously only taken in what she needed to take in at that point in time.
And that's a great point, because a lot of parents have big concerns that if I do talk to my kids about sex, it's going to make them more sexual, or it's going to make them become sexualized earlier. But the research also is the exact opposite. And what it actually, and what I guess we know about kids, and you know this in your own life, regardless of sex, if kids don't want to listen to you, they're just switch off. That's school. You know, they can be learning something and they're just like, nah, not interested anymore. So giving them that information, as you say, we have to often give it many times.
And I think that's the point, is that repetition.
Totally. And if it's not on their radar, then it won't go in. And then there'll come a time where it will go in, you know. And I think coming back to what the research says too, is that when we educate our children, you know, around sex and sexuality as an ongoing, they actually then delay their first sexual experience. They are more likely to have a positive sex experience, and they're more likely to be safe using contraception, those kind of things. So all the research says the same, that when we actually give our children these education, they are equipped to make smarter, more conscious decisions around it, and that's important.
I think also it's important to, like, I think back to a story where I was actually explaining with my girlfriend to her youngest daughter, and not to have hang-ups and think that we have to get the story perfect, because we're only human. And I actually went and explained, because my girlfriend felt that it was better that I did. And I was just talking about the anatomy and why girls menstruate and what actually happens to the uterus, and it allows you to get pregnant. Well, I didn't actually state to this girl, and she was actually probably 11 or 12, but I didn't actually state to her that she has to get pregnant to, the man and the woman need to come together. And I explained that whole process, but my statement of this allows you to get pregnant, she thought when she was getting her period she was going to be pregnant. And so then Donna had to go, no. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And look, I think I always say to parents, there are so many teachable moments all the time. You know, so from when your kids are little and you see a pregnant woman, you can say, look at her belly, it's because there's a baby in there. And then the child might ask, well, how did the baby get in? And you could talk about that. When your kids are a little bit older, you might be watching something on TV and something pops up and you might be going, oh, you know, how do you think that lady looks? There might be a lady who's being really provocative, you know, and, you know, have you heard the word sexy? What does that mean? And that's where, you know, so there's always moments. Or, you know, for ages in the car, on the radio in the mornings when you're driving kids to school and they've got those ads for erectile dysfunction. Right? Just always prime time when you're driving kids to school, right? Maybe they're just trying to get us to talk to our kids more about sex. But always I was just, there's that ad again. So do you know what that's about? Right? So it's about this, you know, so it's ongoing teachable moments with your kids all the time, you know, and so it becomes normal conversation. That's what you want it to be. You don't want it to be this taboo subject, because then it's really loaded for children within that. Whereas the more conversations that we have, the more ease we bring to that, the more comfortable they feel with it, and then they're more likely to come to you with what's going on. I mean, I have a nearly 18-year-old son, and, you know, I'll be like, who needs anything from the supermarket? And he'll be like, I need some deodorant and condoms. I'm like, okay, great. You know, like, it's a nothing. It's a complete nothing. And I'm like, excellent, you're having safe sex. Great.
You would much rather know
completely
than not know.
Totally. So
it's going to happen anyway.
It is, and we want them to be able to come to us, particularly in those teen years, with this is what's going on, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling. Because again, all the research says that children actually want to learn about sex from their parents. They do. They want to have this information, not just about sex, but about intimacy and relationships and all those kind of things. So the earlier we can start, the better it is for keeping that going.
And in today's day and age, I know that one of the first times we spoke, you mentioned that children are seeing porn now on the internet from about the age of 8 or 9. Gone are the days where we found the magazines underneath our dad's bed and started to flick through those. Now it's they're seeing a lot more graphically from a very, very young age, and that has an effect.
Look, porn without doubt is the biggest challenge when it comes to sexuality and healthy sexuality, because exactly as you say, it is at the tip, it's so easy for them to access it. So most children are not around the age of 8 or 9 looking for it. They're stumbling across it by mistake. So the average age that we see that children go searching for it probably is around about the 11, 12 mark. But before then, they are being exposed to it. And I think what we have to understand as adults in this generation right now is that what we would have considered kind of pornography when we were younger was nakedness, people kissing, you know.
It was more photographs rather than...
Yeah, absolutely.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
But that kind of soft porn that we would have seen then is pretty much just normal reality advertising today.
Yes.
So whether you're in the supermarket, whether you're in the shopping centre, Instagram, wherever, you're seeing a version of really highly sexualised culture that our kids are just seeing, and, you know, you can't be immune to it. It's just around us. So then when they do stumble across porn, sometimes it is because they're innocently searching something and stuff comes up. And, you know, it's really good to have filters on your computers and your phones and all those kind of things. But even if they can still stumble across it, or they go to someone else's house and someone's looking at it. Yeah. So the important thing is to understand we have to talk to our children about it. Absolutely. When they're, you know, around that 8, 9, 10-year-old mark, around pictures and images that you might see. Yes. Now, the impact of porn is, we'll get to that in a minute, on what that's having with teenagers, but the key thing is having conversations with your kids to say there are bad pictures on the internet. You know, so you can even start that when your kids are little. Like, even if they're watching Peppa Pig, you know, you might say to them, look, sometimes you might see things like people hurting each other or being mean to animals and stuff like that. And what you say to the kids from their little age is, whenever you see something that looks a bit frightening or a bit yucky, you just turn it off straight away. Come and tell me. You will not get in trouble. And it doesn't mean you won't still be able to watch what you're watching, but you need to come and talk to me so we can talk about it. Because those images can get stuck in your head and that can feel really yucky. Yes. So we start that just as a simple conversation when there's little kids. There's a good book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, which is for little kids. It's different to this one, which is a really great book for kind of, you know, toddler, you know, 3 to 6 year olds, which kind of just talks about seeing bad pictures and good pictures and stuff in a simple way. So that there's a good book there that you could read with your kids around that. And then, you know, as your kids get a little bit older, that 7, 8, 9, what we're talking to them about really is that you may see images and you may see videos, and it can be confusing because even though they might go, oh, yuck, what's that? You know, porn is designed to be arousing. Yes. You know, so that is massively confusing for a child.
Oh,
you know, and their brains
coming from that age perspective.
Yeah, totally.
So they don't get it. They don't understand it. Just on that book, say for instance, people that are tuning in, they've missed the boat from 6 to... Is it good to actually flick through something like that?
You could
just
definitely...
as a, like... they can determine good pictures, bad pictures, and
so that's a good age. There's another there's a really wonderful website called safeforkids.com.au, and Holly Ann her work is very much about helping children stay safe sexually. So she does a lot of work in primary schools around, you know, bodies and private parts, but also when you see pictures. So she's got some great books and resources that I really recommend having a look. Safeforkids.com.au, which talk about how you can have these conversations with your kids, and also books that you could actually read with your kids, so when they're a bit older. So I have a 10-year-old and we've read these books and talked about those, so they're still really appropriate for that. And then you've got stuff for when your kids probably are a little bit older, that moving into the tween years. So there's a great free program out at the moment called, I've just got to get it right, Cultured Reframed. So I'll give you the link to that, culturereframed.org. And it's a free course for parents for tweens and teenagers about pornography and about sexualisation. And it's really great. It's a free course. It's set up by a lot of really great health professionals.
I was just going to say, who set it up?
Well, it's set up, they're from kind of people from all over around the world, but it is a UK-based thing. I'm pretty sure it's UK-based. And it's a program you could sit and look at with your teens and your tweens. Right. So you can go through it together and you can talk about it and have conversations about it. And it also has scripts for you to go to have these conversations with your kids. Have you seen porn? You know, what does that look like? So it talks you through ways to actually do that. So that's another excellent resource that you could do for that as well. And then the other great resource, while we're talking about resource, is from Sex Ed Rescue. These are 2 of Kath Hackison's books. So her website, Sex Ed Rescue, is a brilliant resource for any parent watching this going, I don't even know where to start. Go to her website, because on it she has loads and loads of free information, scripts on how you can talk to your kids about sex, all those different things to kind of hold your hand through it. So there's actually some excellent resources on the internet, you know, to help you. It's knowing the right ones and how you get there with it. Yeah, totally. So really, again, I think, if we haven't had those conversations with our kids when they're younger, then it's never too late to start. I say you always, even if you've got teenagers now, you need to check in with them around how you're feeling around these things.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to get over your own discomfort. So we've been talking about porn, and we have been speaking to a mother who found her 7-year-old child looking at porn, and we saw through her social media account, she shared the journey throughout that day, from her absolute shock and despair. She was in tears. I can't believe my child has just seen porn. What do I do? And then she journaled it throughout the day, and her process of dealing with it to the end of the day, where she was quite calm. But that is something that every mother and parent would go through when they've first seen their child seeing porn.
Oh, completely. And look, it may be 13 or 14. It's not such a, but at 7 or 8, it's absolutely massively alarming because, these images and what they're seeing, our young brains are not equipped to deal with stuff like that, and it does have a big impact. And it can set up big shock patterns in the child. It can actually set up quite a bit of trauma in the child as well. And then the child, and what kids do is they often then try to figure out what has happened to them. They can sometimes act that out. So they're seeing that now with behaviours of some kids, who are acting sexually to other children, because they are reenacting what they've seen. They are trying to make sense of what's happened. Children process stuff through playing, and so that we're seeing that also has a big impact on people as well around it. And when a situation like that, of course it brings up all your feelings as a mother. I mean, it brings up that I should have been protecting my child, and how did that happen? So I always just say, firstly, that mum needs a lot of listening and hearing for her to just move through all those big feelings, and then come back to connection and as much connection as possible with the child. So the child has the opportunity to let out how they feel about it, what's going on, in a safe environment, knowing they're not going to get punished, knowing that they haven't, there's no shame, just, you've come across this and I'm sorry that I haven't kept you safe from that. So let's talk about what that is around it.
And how do you talk about it? What sort of conversation do you have with a 7, 8 or 9-year-old? So someone who is younger, what do you say?
So for me, I always start with, whenever we're needing to have big conversations with children, it's always about creating connection first. So whether that's snuggling on the couch, whether it's doing something they love, making them feel safe, and then saying, hey, there's something I really wanted to talk to you about. I feel really worried because I know that you saw these pictures, and I understand that your brain, which is so amazing and takes in lots of information, isn't really equipped to see these pictures. These are pictures for adults to see. And when children see them, that can be really alarming. So I'm wondering how it felt for you. You're not in trouble, but I'm wondering how it felt. Did it feel kind of exciting to look at it? Or did it feel scary, but scary that you couldn't look away? So you might just want to give your child a few opportunities to say how they feel about that. And really what you're reiterating the whole time, it is safe for you to talk to me about this. You can come and tell me anything, and really empathizing. It must have felt strange seeing that, and look, then it's just continually opening up the conversation so the child can come to you and talk to you how they feel about that.
I probably like to also bring up that, just to get rid of any parent or mother guilt, that if it has actually happened and you haven't reacted the right way, because I'm one of those parents, it's not to feel guilty about it, but it's just to educate yourself on, and you might be in catch up, but that's okay.
Totally. I always say it is never too late to repair, and it's never too late for healing.
That's
so
right.
if you have reacted in a way that's been over the top, then you can always go back to your child and say, hey, remember that time that happened and I did this? That's because I felt so scared inside me that I reacted in that really big way. And usually when mummy does yell, or if I feel like that, it's because I'm not feeling in balance. And I'm really sorry, because I need to do better for that. And I'm sorry if it scared you. And it's never too late. I mean, there's no such thing as the perfect parent. We all completely lose our shit at times, right? We're human, right? But within that moment, we also need to be able to repair. And even in modelling that repairing, what you doing to your child is showing them it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to say I'm sorry. We have to be, firstly, deeply compassionate with ourselves as parents.
Because I even remember the journey from my daughter sitting on the couch, discovering the history that she had been looking, and then going, my journey from shock horror on my face to Pearl, and she's seen that, and I could see she was in shock, to actually walking up the hallway, and she wasn't following me at this stage. Every sort of emotion, thinking, what am I doing? What am I going to do? Is this, how am I going to react to this? Yes. And so I needed that moment to walk away, collect myself. Yes. And I'm not saying that I collected myself beautifully, but I was in panic. And I was like, okay, how do we handle this?
And I often recommend to parents with any issue around parenting, whether it's that or whether your kid's hitting someone or whatever, when we have a reaction, the first thing we need to do is take a deep breath, but sometimes go and remove ourselves. And I'm a big fan of what we call having listening partnerships, which is a friend you can ring and just say, this just happened, can you just listen to me for a few minutes? I have to just blur all the feelings I've got. Now, what that does is allowing you to be heard in all your angst and fear and all that kind of stuff. You get it out. So then you can come back to your child without carrying all that, right? So then you're open and you're centered for your child to have those conversations. You know,
and if you cry for 3 days,
that's
it's okay.
absolutely fine. That's part of your process. It's part of your process.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You know, so I think it's a really good, it's a great fallback for any parent, is that when we have a reaction, we need to be heard in our reactions, like our kids need to be heard when they have big feelings. So if you can go and just speak to somebody first, you know, who will listen to you with empathy, process what you need to process and all your stuff around it, so then you come back and you're like, okay, so how does that feel for you? You know?
Absolutely.
And for parents who have missed that boat and they do have teenage children now who have seen porn, we've spoken a lot about the implications of porn on children and their understanding around it and how they therefore view sex and love, I guess. Can you talk a little around?
Yeah, so I teach sex education to high school students. So I'm mainly working with 14 and 15-year-olds, and we do a lot about pornography because, as we mentioned earlier on, you know, porn is our biggest sex educator at the moment. You know, it's very different to how we grew up. It's you know, a 12-year-old curiously is going to search sex, and what is going to pop up is hardcore pornography. It's not nice, gentle stuff. It's hardcore stuff, okay? So what we have to understand about the teenage brain is that when a child is firstly, that's their imprint of sex and sexuality, what happens is they start to watch these images and these videos, and of course they get aroused because that's what pornography is designed to do. It's designed to make you feel turned on. And then as he's going through puberty, then they might masturbate to the porn, and so then they get a pleasure response with it, and then usually they probably feel a bit of shame afterwards because they know that watching, you know, somebody be pretty aggressive or violent towards a woman in a sexual act is probably not right, but that's what I'm seeing, and if I keep clicking I see it again and again and again and again and again, so that must be what it's about. So what happens in this 12-year-old brain is that dopamine release they get says, I want to do that again because that's exciting and it's arousing for me, and so they watch it again and again, and what we talk to the teenagers about is that we have to break down that porn is not real. It's people acting, and with the teens I go through everything that we see, you know, that's different to what is reality. So we never see contraception in it, we never see consent, never, I don't even say rarely, we never see consent. It is more focused on male pleasure than it is on female pleasure. You know, bodies are completely in this whole stereotypical, you know, buff, and women have big boobs and there's no pubic hair, and men have big penises and all that kind of stuff. So again, they're looking at, they're going, that's what you have to look like when you have sex, right? And we also do these acts that are really quite physical and really quite violent, you know. So the issues we see and I have many friends who are doctors who work in teenage sexual health, they see many young girls who have trauma to their anuses because they're being made to have anal sex because that's what they see as normal, right? So we see, you know, so what's happening is this is imprinting on boys at a young age that they say this is what sex is. Now the issue with that is that young boys will have watched hundreds of hours of porn before they've even held a girl's hand, right? Before they've even actually had their first kiss. So because what their brain is imprinted in is this whole turn-on factor, arousal around this violent kind of act of sex, when they do kiss a girl or when they do, you know, do some heavy petting, it feels nothing. Because, you know, they need that in order to be turned on. And then what we see is that develops into an addiction which creates what we call porn-induced erectile dysfunction. which is a new thing that they've classified, right? Which they're seeing a lot of in young men. Because they're relying on porn to get turned on and to do that. And then when they're with a person, that doesn't match up, and so their bodies don't work in the same way. And so the only way to stop that is to wean them off porn. So what's interesting, I was reading this study yesterday, is that when men do have porn-induced erectile dysfunction in adults, if they wean off porn, often what will happen is they will default quite easily back to their imprint, which was kind of normal sexuality. But with young teens, it doesn't, because they've had no imprint of that healthy sexuality. And so therefore, you know, what is just normal turn on doesn't necessarily register. It's not even an imprint in their brain. So I think the thing to understand about this is, you know, that's on one level for the male. For the female, you know, and not as many females are watching porn. Like it's, you know, they say regularly around about 28% of teen girls. But even if they've watched it and they would have seen it at some point, you know, again, what it's sold to girls about being what we call porn ready, which means that you're sexy enough and you do all this. So again, there's no intimacy, there's no kissing, there's no any of that kind of beautiful stuff that we know. Yeah, totally. So then they think that's how I should behave in order for a boy to like me, right?
And that's like the photos on Instagram, taking the photos, sticking their tongue out, and their
of course. So that's what we're basically imprinting in our children as this is what it is to be sexual and you know, and sexy in our culture, right? So it's a massive issue, and it's one that parents should be alarmed about and get angry about, because the porn industry is a $1 billion industry that makes so much money, and our children are just there. So it's not going anywhere. It is, and I think if you're naive to think my kid won't see porn, I'll put all these filters on, I think they will. You know, it's just a matter of when. You know, so that's why we need to have these discussions with our kids beforehand. Now, the antidote to all this. How do we do this?
I've been dying to ask.
Is education. So look, you know, what I do with the kids in high school is I go, I just firstly want you to say that porn is not wrong. You know, like it's okay to watch it. It's okay to be interested. But what we have to break down is that it's not real. So let's work all that kind of stuff down and then look at what it feels like in your body. So we are then educating the kids around, you know, what's exciting about being with someone. It's the conversations that you might be together. It's getting your brain turned on around what might happen. It's the touch, it's our skin. It's like, that's what's exciting. So breaking down around what kind of real sex and intimacy looks like. And then a big component of what I teach about is about pleasure-based education, especially for girls. So the boys' pleasure is kind of, you know, that's expected, but for females it's just like, well, it's more about that than it is about them. So, you know, I talk to girls about how their bodies are designed to work. In order to have orgasms for women, you classically need to feel relaxed and feel safe. So you release oxytocin, so this is what happens. So, you know, if you're at a party and you want to hook up and there's people around, your body's not necessarily going to go, this feels okay for me to do that. So probably the sex is not going to feel good. Right? So if we start educating about how our bodies are designed to work, how we could have good sex, you know, then that is, again, another step for helping them understand, do you want to have bad sex? Then that is what constitutes bad sex, and this is actually really good. So we need to make consent and understanding about how our bodies work a sexy thing. So they go, I'm not going to stand for that. I want to have my pleasures as important as your pleasure, right? So that's like just, again, the education that we need. But as far as parents and how we do that, it is, again, about modelling good, healthy relationships, kindness, intimacy, touch in front of your kids, that this is what healthy relationships look like, and talking about it. Again, what we see on television, like I don't watch that Married at First Sight show, but I keep seeing everyone comment on Facebook about this and that, and I'm like, watch it with your kids, because I'm sure there are many opportunities to talk about what is normal and healthy relationships and what is not, right? And then talking about, you know, what we see on Instagram and people who are being sexy and why and all those kind of things. So helping kids to become, you know, to become conscious around, why do people do that? And is that okay? And should we be doing that? And am I worth more than that? I mean, the bottom line of what we want to do is teach our kids, you are worthy of having a beautiful, intimate, incredible... Yes, totally.
And that's actually just what highlighted... I just had an aha then, where I went... Actually, my conversation with my son and my daughter in a couple of years is actually... Because old school, you'd be going... Don't even think about that till you're this age, and not even talking about how it may be, but it's actually talking about how it should be and how you should experience it, not putting... Like, obviously, we don't want our children having sex at 13, but we've got to be real of that when they actually... an average age, but how that feels and and creating that environment.
Completely.
Not us personally, but for them to...
That's what it is.
Yeah, in their mind.
So, you know, I have 2 daughters who are 14 and 10, and we've been talking about this for years. Like, the poor kids have got the mother who's a sex educator.
Do they roll their eyes at you?
No, look, sometimes they do. But here's this: the other day, my daughter turns up with one of her friends, 14-year-old, and she's like, "Oh, can we talk to you?" And I was like, "Yeah, come sit down." And her friend's like, "I've got a question. I can't ask my mum." And I'm like, "Well, I'm the person. Go for it." And you know, she had all these questions about sex, right? So we just talked about everything, and she's like, "Can I come back next week and ask some questions?" I'm like, "You can." And then I was like, and I said, "Okay, now's the time. I need to give you this book to read." And there's a great book that I gave them. It's called For Fox's Sake, and it's written by a Melbourne woman, and it's perfect for teenage girls around all the aspects they want to know about sex and sexuality. I'm like, this is your Bible now, so look at this book, ladies, and any questions you have, you come back and talk to me about it. So, and that book is about pleasure and about empowerment and all those kind of things. And I've drummed home with my daughters for so long, you know, and my daughter kind of rolls her eyes at this. She's like, "I get it, Mum, I get it." You know, that you and your body is so amazing and it's worthy of having pleasure. And if you are ever in a situation where your body's like, doesn't feel good, then it's a no. You know, and again, coming back to this is what we teach our kids from little, right? When they have what we call those early warning signs, when, you know, somebody's hugging them and they don't like it, or they get a funny vibe from someone, that they come and tell you, my tummy feels funny, I don't feel safe. And we listen to that so that we are imprinting again in our kids. You have a barometer in your body that says this feels good or it doesn't. And so as we reinforce that time and time and time again when they're teens, you know, they then have that authority to go, you know. So I say to my 14-year-old sometimes, so let's just say you're in a situation with a guy and you like him and you might be kissing or something, and then he goes to touch your boob and you're not ready for that. I go, "What are you saying?" She goes, "I go, back off, buddy." And I go, "With you." And I go, "And if it feels good?" She goes, "Well, if it feels good, then I'm going to do that. But if it doesn't, I'm going to say, hey, I'm not ready for that." And I'm like, have a good, strong no. You know, what we want is for them to have a good, strong no. So this is talking again and again and again and again so that she sees that. Now, I absolutely appreciate that for some parents, that's hard to do because that's not what was imprinted in them. And it certainly is, you know, if you feel like you've left it too late, I just want to say it's never too late to start having these conversations, especially with teens. The perfect time to talk about sex is in the car. Yes, because you're driving, you're not making eye contact. You know, talk about those kind of things, and you can start conversations about, wow, I've just seen this really interesting video podcast about pornography and the impact on teens. You know, do your mates and you talk about porn? Like, start an open conversation around something like that.
Can I ask though? There are going to be children, like I would say I'm quite an open book and we have discussed all along, but I have a son that will not have the conversation. So much so he goes, "I'm not talking about this with you. Don't ask me. Don't talk to me. Leave me alone," basically.
So look, that's absolutely understandable too. And it might be that he might feel more comfortable having a conversation with a male than it is with his mum.
No, because his dad did try,
and he's still no.
He's just like, that's my. And actually, my girlfriend's got 3 daughters. The eldest and the youngest. The middle one don't even talk to me.
So what's a good thing to do if they are pretty clearly saying don't come near me? Then use books. You know, there's some great books out there, and you can go, "Okay, mate, I know you don't want to talk to me about it because it seems awkward, but there's information that you really need to know, so you're safe. And because I want you to have good sex and I want it to feel good for you, so here's a good book that you should read around that."
Great.
Yeah, and then you leave it in his room, and you know what? They will go and read it because they're curious, because they might think they know everything, which they don't, but then they'll actually go and read it and go, okay, that's a good thing. You know, or you could say there's some really great websites out there for teenagers, all those questions about sex, you know, that you could say, send them a link. I know, you know, and use humour. I know this is not the conversation we're having, but go to this website because there's heaps and heaps of good articles here about questions you want to know. And I just want to make sure you're getting the right info. I respect that you might not want to talk to me about that, but here's the other info. And again, you know, that way you're giving him the information, and again, you're just modelling with you in your relationship, that healthy relationship. You know, you're making conversations open, and you might find that as he gets just a little bit older, he might, like, you know, enter into those conversations a little bit more.
I find it quite interesting that, like, he, as far as showing his body or what, he doesn't care, all of that. But actually, when we get to the conversation, it's like, no, we're not talking about
that one. No,
So all that information we're actually going to put on the website. So all the resources that Lael's provided us today, which has been amazing, Lael. Just thank you so much.
We could go on forever.
I know, but I think we'll probably bring Lael in at another time.
Absolutely. Yes. So all of the links will be on the website underneath the video and shared through our social media. The books will all be on there as well. If you're wanting to get in contact with Lael, who does sort of public education workshops as well.
Yeah, so I do workshops on how to talk to your kids about sex, which is for parents. I also do aware parenting workshops too. So if you're looking for other ways to connect with your children or you've got issues, and that's from like little kids up into teens, then I do those. And I also do one-on-one sessions as well. So if you've got big story or issue or you don't know how to do it, then I can do sessions, on Skype or in person.
Right. And they can find you at facebook.com.
Lael Stone.
LaelStone.
Yeah.
Thank you for
My
joining
pleasure.
us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And so if you do have any questions for Lael, you will be able to put those underneath our social media as well, and we can pass them on to Lael.
Great.
And we might even get you in on a live one night.
Yes.
And,
Great.
questions.
Yeah,
All right.
perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.